When you make next year's budget, is it just this year's results plus or minus 10%? Or do you really think about what you put into the budget? Hello, I'm Tom. Welcome to my channel where we talk about continuous improvement in an industrial setting. And today's video, it comes from frustration that I felt a couple of times when going into a budget cycle. And again, it's September now that I'm filming it. We're in budget period, the budget season again. And what I see happening too often is that you take this year's budget with the actual results and you make some predictions. We can do it 5% or 10% better. We should save on labor cost per ton of product, and a good target is to be 10% cheaper. But how, right? That when material costs are going up, you say, but we will save it by efficiency. So there's a 20% increase in the material cost, but we will go down 50% in waste. Then it is nicely linked and we don't have to really change anything in the pricing. Great, but how do you make it work? And these are the things that I want to talk to you about in this video. You see, I am a firm believer in that you should make a budget based on what you can operationally do. So especially if we're talking about the operations budget, right? But we do the same also for sales and marketing. We know how many campaigns are we going to do, which percentages are we going to give to how many customers. That gives a good idea of how much money you will spend. In operations, you also know how much product am I going to make, what is going into the product, what does it cost me right now, what can we do in our factory or factories, what is our standard level, even if we don't really agree with the current standard, if we're not happy with the current standard, but you know what your current standard level of operating is, and that is a good basis for what we're going to do next year. But then adding a bit on top or slicing 10% off, that's not really going to help us to make the budget. What we should do instead is to check what can we improve. So you need a loss analysis and to determine which parts of those losses can we eliminate and what is it going to take to eliminate them. So plan it ahead. And of course, a plan never survives the first contact with the enemy. So also a budget, as soon as you go into the year, things will change. But at least you have a good roadmap of ideas, of projects, of ways to make sure that your operational results really improve, and the budget is a financial translation of that improvement roadmap. Now, one of the easier things to get into this idea is when we're talking about material waste. So we have offcuts and defects, then we put into place the teams, the improvement project that we say, well, this will solve 80% of that specific defect. That defect was 1% of our total material costs, so we're going to save 0.8% of the material costs. This is something we are going to plan in the second quarter. It will be finished by half of the year, so half of a year we're going to profit from this in our P&L. But it's a good way. It's pretty basic with material expenditure. When you get into more the yield and interaction type of questions, it also becomes more complex. I wanted to share with you a specific case, and this is labor, because labor, again, it is a hot topic. We cannot find labor. Labor is getting more expensive. Labor is also one of those things that, let's say, many C-level executives really would just like to see cut it by 10%, and let's put that as a target. While if you work at a factory or a logistics organization or any labor-intensive operation, we should look in a different way. And I took the industrial example here, but in the end, you've got your labor demand. It is the volume of product that you plan to produce, divided by the nameplate capacity of your line. So basically what we're doing here is we're saying this volume can theoretically be made in so much machine time. But we also know that our machines are not 100% effective. So we also divide by the OEE, the effectiveness of that equipment. This top line will give us the machine hours required to produce that volume. Now, when we know how many hours we need each of our lines, we multiply that by how many people are running that line. This can be even a number lower than 1. If 2 lines are run by 1 operator, you could say, well, that's 0.5 manning. But we know for either one machine or a line that is built up out of several workstations, how many people run this line. When the line is on, there's 5 people on it. When the line is off, there's nobody on it. So that is your manning number. Then this you divide by the overall labor effectiveness, and this is basically, I've got how many people should really be on the line when it's on, but be there and just be available. If they're gone, the line stops. But then they also have breaks, they also have training, they also have other things to do. You also maybe have a supervisor to guide it if they're indirect or indirect. It depends a little bit, but those are really the details. But there are some non-directly value-added activities also in your labor specifically. So if we've got a percentage of 80% or so labor effectiveness, we divide by that so we get more people. Right? You have how many people are on that line, and you increase it because those people are sometimes not there. Plus you add the absence rate. Now, some companies choose to put sickness and vacation leave into their OLE number. That is perfectly fine. So then you don't really have that separate term, but know that this is such a big thing. I mean, absenteeism, it's somewhere between 15 and 25% of your labor force. Already only the vacation time that you give out, but also a couple of percentages of the time your people will be sick, they will not be available, you have to replace them. So there we have quite a serious addition to how much labor we have. Now, if we do this whole formula, then we know how many labor hours or how many full-time employees, FTEs, we are going to need to make our budgeted volume of products. When we know this, we can put it in the budget. But now, of course, our C-level executives wanted that 10% reduction. Here we can now say, what are we going to do? Which levers are we going to pull to make that happen? Can we, for instance, increase the OEE of several of our key lines, specifically those lines that have a lot of people working on them? Because if we can do that, then we can either make the required volume without opening more hours, or the other way around, reduce the number of hours. But we could work on OEE. We could install a new line that has a much bigger capacity. So in the end, you don't need so many operators for a larger volume of production coming out. We're just making it more effective in that way. Or can we do something about our ridiculously high illness rates? Maybe that is a problem with you where you are really above, let's say 4% is sort of normal, 5-6% here in Western Europe for serious industrial jobs. If you are way higher than that, it's something to work on. If you are a lot lower, it's also, if you compare to industry standards, are very low in absenteeism, then you can also explain and discuss that this lever cannot do a lot. If your OEE is already way over 80%, there's probably not a lot of wiggle room here. But maybe you can look at how many people are running the line. Can we do some restructuring, or can we move the lines or invest in making it easier to have multiple workstations? Can we reduce this one? And if we are talking in this way about the operational improvements, the practical levers that we can use, that we can pull to reduce our labor usage, then we are really budgeting. And I know the finance department, in the end, they just want a labor, and then preferably immediately in dollars or euros or whatever currency, how much are we going to spend lump sum and per kilo of product? But this whole system, so how do you break it up? That is what you need to make a good budget. Now, the other big benefit coming from this, if you just put a lump sum amount for your labor spend next year. And then next year, you go over it. Yeah. What will you say? We went over. It was a tough time. Or the volume was pretty low compared to what we planned, or you don't really know. If you want to say something sensible about the deviations you see from your budget, and also this will lead in, and right? If you follow my channel, you know that deviations lead to problem solving, lead to improvement. So if you want to identify the deviations in your operation that lead to these special things happening with the budget, so deviating from the budget, you also want to be tracking all of those elements. You want to be able, if it is May next year, to check, the OEE of our lines, of our key lines. Is it behaving like we predicted? And if yes, then it has to be somewhere else. Now, what was actually the absenteeism rate that we budgeted for? Oh, we're a lot higher. Here we have a problem. Now we are going to look in the area of human resource management. We're going to look in ergonomics. We're going to look in maybe also motivation, but focus on what is keeping our people at home. Not a good situation to be in. Not for those people, not for the other people still in the plant who have to do a bit more work, not for your finances. It comes from an analysis of the components of what in the end gives labor cost. That way you can afterwards also use the budget, because it's basically my other frustration with budgets. Once you made them, and especially if you then translate everything into lump sums, they don't motivate operations people. Let's put it like that. But if you have this breakdown of what you are planning to do in your production, in your logistics, in your operational systems, and then you see, hey, wait a minute, we are now underperforming compared to what we know we can do, or that we said that we would improve, then you have something that, in my experience, it motivates a lot more people like us, people who like performance excellence, lean operations. We are more motivated by seeing what side our problem is on, what are the areas that we need to focus on, but also how are we doing compared to what we agreed we should be doing. In fact, on this one, there's even a layer deeper. If the labor costs are actually normal and nice, but you see that underlying, we have actually put a much higher manning on that line and also did improve the OEE here, it might be acceptable. But we may also say, hey, can we still work on this one while keeping the high result there? Can we get back to standard on some of these subcomponents while keeping the others at their exceedingly high level? Would be interesting, no? That way you can overscore your budget as well, because you know that the components are deviating from what you expected. By the way, if you do see one of them a lot higher than you planned, you actually also want to know what happened, because you want to keep that new performance level. You want to make sure that this becomes the new standard. That way the future lies. That is continuous improvement. And now you see, I'm even getting enthusiastic about the budgeting, about this whole budget control and making sure that things work. And I can tell you, I'm not motivated by it when it's only the lump sums that are there, and just it becomes this blame game of where did it go wrong. Get to the operational underlying points, track those, because that is our business. That is what we know how to fix, we can fix, and we can add value to our organization by breaking it down into what are we going to do physically. Now, if you agree with this, hit that like button, share a comment. If you have a different opinion, please also do share a comment. I want to know from you, how do you look at this budgeting process? And also, if you come from a slightly different part of the organizational world, if you're not too much in continuous improvement or operations management, but maybe more in finance, or you are a CEO, let me know what is your take on what I just told. For now, I wish you the best of luck in your budgeting process. And as always, enjoy the continuous improvement journey.